Aita for being friends with someone my best friend hates. Here is the situation. I, male, 24, have been friends with this guy, whom we will call James, since birth. James and I grew up down the street from each other, played on the same basketball teams, attended the same summer camps, and participated in each other's family reunions. We did everything together for years. We snuck into pools, evaded authorities, pulled senior pranks, went on camping trips, etc. He was my best friend. After graduating high school, we gradually drifted apart. He attended college about an hour away, while I remained local. However, we still met up with our friends to grab food, play top golf, or watch games. I would see him approximately once a week or once a month over the past 5 years. James is genuinely one of the nicest people I know. He was the kid who would shovel the driveways of elderly neighbors when it snowed, and he was raised in the most service-oriented family I have ever encountered. He is also one of the funniest people on earth, although he tends to push boundaries, as all good comedians do. After years of friendship, he makes outrageous comments to me, which I find hilarious and dismiss as no big deal, because I know he is not a bad person. These are the types of jokes that, if made public, could seriously damage his prospects in college and his career. This context is important because I believe James is a good person, but not everyone shares that view specifically. My ex-girlfriend, female, 24 and current best friend, whom we will call Maddie. Maddie dislikes James, and here is why. 1. We went to Miami to celebrate my 22nd birthday. I have known Maddie for 5 years, and we had only been dating for a month at that time. Maddie attended the same high school as James and me, and we eventually became best friends before starting our romantic relationship. We rented an Airbnb for the trip, and 6 of us went, including James, who was engaged at that point, and Maddie's friend Ashley. James's fiancée was studying abroad during our trip. Maddie and I made many jokes at Ashley's expense while traveling to Miami, suggesting, "What if James fell in love with you and left his fiancée?" This seemed funny at the time because, while James is well-liked, Ashley was 3 years older and appeared uninterested in him, making me think she was out of his league. Fast forward to the final day of our 5-day trip to Miami. Maddie and I wake up, and Ashley joins us. The night before, we had all been watching movies together, and Maddie and I went to sleep around 2 a.m. Ashley tells us that once we fell asleep, everyone dozed off where they sat on the mattresses and couches in the room. She and James ended up falling asleep next to each other. The Airbnb was small. Picture a mattress we pulled onto the floor where 3 people, including James and Ashley, were lying, while the other 3 of us were on the couch. Ashley mentions that James had put his arm around her, and they slept side by side. She says his hand may have inadvertently brushed against her chest. The way Ashley describes it makes me think she is implying that James is actually interested in her, as we joked about. Then we start driving home, and Ashley sits in the front seat because she's tall, with James driving. I am in the middle, with a friend on my right and Maddie on my left. James places his hand on the emergency brake situated between him and Ashley. Maddie interprets it as him holding her hand. I do not have a clear view, but I am like, "No way." I take her word for it since she has a better perspective, and she thinks I am confirming her suspicions when, in fact, I am confused. Eventually, we get back home. Ashley and Maddie have a phone conversation in which Ashley states she feels uncomfortable and believes James should inform his fiancée about what occurred. In my mind, I am thinking, wait, was this serious or not? I thought he had simply fallen asleep and put his arm around you while sleeping. Maddie and Ashley discuss it, and Maddie agrees that this was not acceptable behavior. I start to rethink things, realizing that James, in a way, cuddled another girl while his fiancée was away. I find myself thinking, "James, what were you thinking?" Maddie is upset, and I am at a loss for what to do. Maddie and Ashley begin using terms like groping, and I feel confused. Just the day before, Ashley was joking about this with us. The conversation escalates, and I realize that I do not want to dispute someone's claims of feeling wronged. I am also feeling sad and uncertain about how to navigate this situation. Maddie insists that I should cut ties with James. Maddie and I were very close and in love at that moment, so I agree because I do not want people who exploit others in my life. I end up crying, accepting that it is time to end this friendship. A few days later, someone messages a group chat where both James and Maddie are included about making plans. I have still not spoken to James. I think to myself, oh no, this is about to blow up, since both Maddie and I no longer want to see James. I prepare to decline the invitation, and then out of the blue, Maddie decides she wants to go. When we meet James, she is friendly toward him. I am utterly perplexed. I think back to how she spent hours explaining why I should not be friends with him, and now she is acting friendly. The next day, Ashley calls James and informs him that she feels uncomfortable about the trip, urging him to tell his fiancée. Ashley then calls us to discuss the conversation and states that James agreed to inform his fiancée about what transpired. I do not hear anything from James. A few days later, I finally see him alone. He brings up the call from Ashley. I am still reeling from what Ashley said, and while not knowing how to proceed, I still care about James and want him to find happiness. We talk, and he asks about the call, to which I reply, "What do you mean?" He claims that nothing happened between him and Ashley, except that they slept next to each other. He conveys that since Ashley said she felt uncomfortable, he told her he would let his fiancée know to ease her discomfort, but he did not want to make his fiancée think he did something wrong when nothing occurred. My reality shatters. Who do I believe? The guy I have known for years to be a good friend, or my girlfriend's best friend, whom I feel hesitant to doubt because questioning someone's experience isn't right? I am torn, but I am with James, so I encourage him to let things settle and hope everything will turn out fine. Months later, Maddie brings it up again, suggesting, "I don't know, Ashley has been known to exaggerate things," and I am taken aback because I remember her supporting Ashley and likely convincing me that this was a serious issue, yet I remain silent and merely express that it is indeed a difficult situation. 2. Over a year later, Maddie and I break up but remain friends. Since neither of us has many friends, we stay close. I assist her with moving apartments, and we continue to grab meals and hang out. Eventually, we establish a friends with benefits arrangement, which allows us to enjoy each other's company without the typical relationship conflicts. I am aware of many relationship issues, and I am working with a therapist to improve myself in this area. One night, James contacts me to hang out while I am with Maddie. I explain to him that I cannot join because Maddie is going through a tough time and has been crying, so I came over to make sure she eats and provides support. James texts me, saying to hit it and quit it and come hang out with him. Maddie sees the message and is furious. Memories of the previous scenario resurface, and Maddie accuses both James and me of being sexist, claiming we both exploit people and calling James horrible for his actions toward Ashley. I respond, "Whoa, I agree that this message was in poor taste and an inappropriate joke." I acknowledge that it was not right for him to send that text. However, we both know James well enough to understand that he did not intend any harm. That explanation does not ease the tension, so I inform James of the situation. He immediately contacts Maddie, but she does not answer, and he leaves her a lengthy voicemail apologizing, stating that he did not mean anything by the message and regrets sending it. He explains that he only feels comfortable making such jokes with me because he knows I am not someone who treats people poorly. Maddie remains unconvinced and is still angry at both him and me. I just want to ensure she is all right, so I continue apologizing, but Maddie insists that I must end my friendship with James. I am taken aback by her request, though I have contemplated this situation before. Part of me thinks she might be right, and maybe I need to seek friendships with higher standards. Yet I am still conflicted internally because James is a lifelong friend. Now, a couple of months later, Maddie continues to harbor animosity toward James. I have not seen him for some time. Then, a mutual friend invites both James and me to join a basketball team. I agree, and I see that James has also signed up. When Maddie finds out that I am playing on the same team as James, she is furious. At this point, she has issued me an ultimatum: quit the team or she will cease all association with me. I know I need new friends and relationships all around, and I acknowledge my shortcomings in relationships. However, I genuinely care about both Maddie and James and want both of them to lead fulfilling lives. I enjoy spending time with each of them occasionally. I do not envision getting back together with Maddie, but I want her to be happy. What do people think? Am I in the wrong for continuing my friendship with James? Story 2. Ayo, I think I want to break up with my boyfriend. I sought some guidance on this matter. For context, this is my first boyfriend, 23 years old, male, and I, 22 years old, female, have been together for approximately 2 years. We have experienced ups and downs like any other relationship, but we have persevered. Let's call my boyfriend Billy. Billy and I met while we worked at Amazon together. We were friends for a year before we began developing romantic feelings for each other and eventually started dating. He is a stoic, laid-back guy with a gentle and playful side. It was an intriguing crush that evolved into my greatest admiration. We started off as close friends and ultimately became what I now describe as my best friend and lover in one. We have had disagreements, but what troubles me is his jealousy towards people around me, which can be quite irrational. The first instance occurred when I attended a comedy show with our friends, and he believed I was blushing at our mutual friend simply because I was happy to see him. We parked a distance away from the comedy show, and Billy walked ahead with his best friend while I trailed behind in the dark, unnoticed by him. We eventually discussed this matter. The second instance was when we went to the gym together, and he thought I was checking out his best friend. He became upset when I complimented his friend on one of his sets since we were all together. Billy expressed his frustration by asking why I didn't tell him that. I was puzzled because I consistently offer him praise and positive feedback while flirting with him. I ventured into the healthcare field, but I disliked my initial job. It caused me to lose my spark. I was overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid. I started to feel like a mere shell of myself, and I decided to resign from that position. Though I saved myself from that situation, I was unemployed for about 4 months. He assisted me with my car insurance and treated me gently. Since we both live with our families, I was job hunting, relying on my savings while still paying rent. I am thankful for his support, and I transitioned to a different area in healthcare, which I thoroughly enjoy. I am genuinely happy now. I have always struggled with mental health issues, and I felt compelled to share this with Billy. He was the first and only person who listened to my concerns and encouraged me to seek help. I was diagnosed with major depression and began a medication regimen. I have never felt more like myself, and my spark has returned. I returned the favor when he was involved in a serious car accident that totaled his vehicle, helping him regain his footing and eventually acquire a new car. Thankfully, he is completely fine and has made a full recovery. Recently, we have been experiencing more frequent disagreements. I have started to suspect that he has grown too accustomed to me, and I have begun to feel underappreciated. He has stopped giving me thoughtful gifts, has started spending more time playing video games, and our relationship has fallen into a pattern of merely being friends who occasionally kiss and dance together. I attempted to discuss my feelings of underappreciation with him and expressed my desire to go out to eat, stargaze like we used to, or even take walks together in a park for some fresh air. We enjoyed a trip to the zoo and had a date afterward, but then it reverted to the same routine. I have recently started college because I adore my job and want to pursue it further. This is where the complications began. I now have less time available to spend with him, which has led to his insecurities surfacing. He has started questioning why I don't call him as often on my days off, why I don't text him to reassure him as frequently, and I tried to remedy this, which worked for a while until he started asking why I seemed less interested. He began questioning whether I still find him attractive, and I assured him that I do. I simply didn't feel like being intimate after a 12-hour shift. Additionally, I didn't want to be intimate because he hasn't been connecting with me emotionally or being romantic. His flirtation seems contingent upon his mood. I grew uncomfortable with this and began to reject his advances, as he was only attempting to connect with me physically. We were stuck in a cycle, and now that I have school, I prefer to study, go to the gym, return home to my family, and visit him to watch him play video games or grab a bite to eat, watch a little television, maybe be intimate, and then sleep. He has complained about my lack of intimacy, suggesting that if it happens, it's only because I initiated it and there is no foreplay. We lack the time necessary for connection, and I don't feel emotionally connected to him. This brought us back to him needing reassurance and affection. I do my best, as much as I can, and I acknowledge that I can be challenging. I tend to shut down during heated arguments because I get overwhelmed and need time to process things, but he becomes anxious and requires immediate reassurance. I am simply exhausted from this repetitive cycle. I have started to lose interest because he hasn't been romantic or engaged with my interests. He only seems to take an interest when we hit a rough patch. I am drained from desperately trying to fix our relationship, while he remains convinced that I am interested in someone else. He was once the apple of my eye, but now our relationship feels sour, and he accuses me of having crushes on others. Billy has been traumatized by his previous relationship, which occurred in high school. He dated a girl whom I will refer to as Bonnie. Bonnie was not a good person. She cheated on Billy during breaks, and he found Tinder on her phone, among other toxic behaviors. She prioritized her feelings over his and used her depression to justify her actions. As a result, he struggles with trust issues. My phone is open to him, so he can access it whenever he likes. After a disagreement, he looked through my phone while I was asleep and discovered some very old texts between my sister and me regarding one of our earlier disputes. In those texts, she referred to him as a crybaby and likened him to a 5-year-old. I didn't defend him then, and he became upset when he read my messages stating that I had already apologized and didn't understand why he was still upset. That disagreement revolved around his best friend, whom I found to be inappropriate, and we argued about the conversations he engaged in. I had said that I didn't want to be associated with inappropriate behavior, and I hinted that I didn't want to be friends with him any longer. I put Billy in the middle of my conflict with his best friend, leading to a confrontation. I eventually apologized to his friend, who took it well and dismissed the issue. However, Billy was upset that I discussed our difficulties with my sister because she views him as immature, which he finds embarrassing, questioning how he could maintain his dignity with someone so close to me. He insisted that I should keep our disagreements private since he never disrespected me in that way and felt hurt that I hadn't defended him. Later, he acknowledged that he had acted immaturely and admitted he was overreacting. I expressed my regret for sharing details with anyone, and now here I am posting on Reddit. Another minor issue is that I asked why he never posted about us on his social media accounts, and he was unaware that this mattered to me. I realized that I had been the one posting pictures of us to showcase our relationship, making it clear that I have a boyfriend. It made me feel a bit foolish because he didn't mention me on his accounts, apart from when he reposted my pictures on his story briefly. I stopped posting about him and archived our pictures, keeping only one story highlight about us on my account. When we recently attended my sister's wedding, which took place out of state, he mentioned wanting to post our photos since we decided to stay an extra day in a somewhat questionable hotel. While it was enjoyable, it was still a bit sketchy. He claimed he was going to post about us, but couldn't think of a suitable caption. I lightly commented on how that could be challenging, and ultimately, he never did post anything. When we returned to the motel for an extra night, he wanted to explore the nightlife, but I was exhausted from the wedding activities. He informed me he was going out for a walk, and I went back to sleep. Later, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed he had not texted or called to update me, causing me to worry. His location hadn't been updated for about 32 minutes, and I felt alone in a sketchy motel, unsure of what he was doing. I reached out to him, and he returned later, looking as if he had been running, which angered me. I was scared, worried, and alone in a foreign state, concerned about what he might have been doing while I was left behind. To conclude, I have begun to view him more as a friend than a romantic partner, and I realize my feelings are not as strong as they once were. He does not seem to be pursuing a serious or long-term career path, and while I am cheering him on, I question whether we are meant to be together. I love him dearly, and he is my best friend, which makes this situation all the more difficult. Thank you for taking the time to read about my feelings and experiences. Story 3. Aita for breaking up with the person I liked. I want to begin by stating that I remain friends with this individual. I feel a sense of remorse about what transpired, regardless of who is to blame, and we mutually agreed to stay friends. Around September of last year, another person and I started to develop a close relationship, a sort of situationship, as we quickly confessed our feelings for one another. This relationship unfolded long distance, so we had no opportunity to meet in person. Although we had known each other for about a year prior, our connection deepened in the months leading up to this. We communicated daily, often making phone calls, exchanged gifts, and were generally affectionate and considerate with one another. One evening, they proposed that I become their girlfriend, and I felt an overwhelming sense of excitement. Being an anxious person, I sought confirmation of their seriousness to avoid embarrassing myself. However, they immediately recanted, stating that while they liked me, they might never be ready to date me and suggested I should move on. Although it hurt deeply to hear them change their mind so abruptly, I tried to be as understanding as possible. They had struggles with commitment and attachment due to past trauma, so I was not taken aback by their hesitation. I reassured them that their mental health should take precedence, and I believed things were fine as they were. We didn't need to label our relationship, and I was capable of moving on now that I understood there was no potential for us. In the days that followed, they became distant and short with me. Eventually, they sent a message expressing that they were merely being dramatic and that we potentially had a future together. They expressed concern about losing me and the impact of their mental health on our relationship. I reassured them that there was no rush and that they should not date me unless they felt ready. I told them I was willing to be a part of their life in whatever way they required, insisting there would be no pressure or hurry, even though it caused me pain. Despite our conversation about taking things slow, they asked me out just a few days later, and I accepted. Things changed drastically afterward. They began to exhibit signs of what I can only label as avoidant attachment. Their tone shifted entirely, becoming flat and curt most days. They were no longer affectionate, no longer found time to talk, and lost interest in me. They frequently requested space, often asking me not to message them for the day, which resulted in me apologizing for engaging with them in many instances. They claimed it was simply because they were tired and unrelated to me, stating they didn't want to chat in private. They allowed us to interact in group chats with friends while expressing a desire to avoid talking one-on-one. However, I found it difficult to exist consistently in larger groups, which they were aware of due to my limited communication in those settings. They had previously mentioned needing space sometimes, but this felt so overwhelming and pronounced that I didn't know how to process it. They often complained about their exes ruining relationships by making them feel obligated to talk when they requested space, which made me hesitant to object and led me to respect their boundaries. I complied, resulting in very little communication between us from day to day. I attempted to initiate conversations for some time, but they were often too tired to respond, even though I would frequently see them socializing with our friend group for hours. Their demeanor towards our friends was far more enthusiastic and relaxed compared to how they interacted with me. It is important to note that I struggle significantly with anxiety and have experienced trauma, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I have difficulty setting boundaries and expressing when I am hurt. I had recently exited a 2-year relationship where I felt ignored and nearly cheated on, which undoubtedly influenced my reactions. Although I communicated this to them, I wish to acknowledge that I accept responsibility for at least some of this situation, as I did not effectively express my feelings explicitly as I could have. I was afraid to speak up and felt it selfish to be upset at their boundaries, especially since they had resentment towards their ex for similar reasons in the past, so I kept my feelings to myself. I recognized that this was incorrect and not their fault. Over time, the need for space became an expected norm. I would send a good morning message and apologize for doing so, only to not communicate for the remainder of the day. When I tried to engage, they appeared uninterested until I eventually asked if they wanted me to step back, to which they responded affirmatively. They only began to express frustration when I became quiet, as well. I did mention on a few occasions that this situation made me anxious, that I felt I was constantly doing something wrong, or that I didn't feel comfortable sharing when I was hurt. They were typically kind about it, but nothing ever changed. A few days before I ended the relationship, they lashed out, stating that I seemed quiet and acting strangely, which, to be fair, was accurate. I had become quieter as I struggled to comprehend the dynamics of our relationship, and I felt insecure since it appeared they did not want to communicate with me. If I was not actively making an effort, we simply did not talk, as they never initiated conversations or showed interest in my day-to-day life. We had an important discussion that night, and they were genuinely more communicative. They expressed happiness in reassuring me whenever I needed it, but their reassurances held little weight for me, given that their actions did not reflect their words. It seemed that the entire relationship hinged on their feelings. We could engage only if they were in the mood, often only for sexual discussions or if they needed to vent, and I was expected to leave them alone on their terms, even though they had no qualms about conversing with others. I made a concerted effort not to take it personally, but I am inherently sensitive, and this took a toll on me. I shared my feelings with them, and they were understanding and kind, exhibiting more affection than they had shown in weeks. In the days that followed, our conversations increased, albeit in private group chats rather than one-on-one discussions, as this seemed to make them more comfortable. I know I should have allowed more time for things to develop, but at this juncture, I felt so disconnected from them that my feelings began to fade. I did not want to hurt them by remaining in a relationship that was misaligned with our needs. I required love, affection, and time. They seemed to be attempting to engage more, but I perceived a lack of genuine interest. I recognized that it wasn't entirely their fault. They communicated as effectively as they could, and I could have addressed my concerns sooner. When I finally did voice my feelings, they were lovely, but unfortunately, we were still at an early stage in our relationship, and I did not feel secure or valued, leading me to choose to end things. We agreed to remain friends. I questioned whether this was the right decision, but soon after, I learned that they had told my friends they had only dated me because they felt pressure from our friend group, and that they only entered relationships for the sake of attention. I felt wounded by the realization that they had spent so much time convincing me that nothing was wrong, only to reveal underlying reasons for their emotional distance. I had dedicated considerable effort to counteract their coldness and set aside much of myself for them. I strive not to hold them accountable for this, as it was ultimately my choice to do so, and they did what they could. They seem to have returned to a more normal state now that we are just friends, leading me to consider that it might have been the commitment or the label that created problems. I feel it is unjust to blame them for anything, especially as they consistently offered reassurance whenever I finally gathered the courage to ask. However, after a while, their words began to lose significance for me. Am I wrong for ending the relationship so early? The actual duration was just over a month, yet it felt incredibly taxing to me. I realize I could have persevered longer, but I sensed that we were fundamentally different, and as time progressed, my feelings towards them shifted. I am still young, and my previous relationship was detrimental to my well-being. I did not wish to become trapped with someone who did not care for me again. I was not prepared to continue neglecting myself for this connection, and even if that was not their intention, they were exacerbating my struggles. I acknowledge they are not to blame, but should I have tried to endure longer? Story 4. My 28F boyfriend 30M withheld information about the nature of some women he engages with, and I took him having a hard time trusting him again. I'm having difficulty trusting my boyfriend after discovering that he withheld information from me regarding past interactions with another woman from his past, with whom he is still friends. He did not cheat physically, and these events occurred before we began dating, but he was not entirely honest when I inquired about it. It took several discussions for him to provide additional details that he had previously omitted. He has since apologized, and from what I can discern, he appears to be serious about restoring my trust. However, I'm uncertain about the situation and am contemplating leaving. My boyfriend had a friend he met at his former job in our home state. For context, he currently lives on a completely different coast, and I have moved further north. The woman I'm referencing still resides in our home state. I have known him for a while, but we only started dating a few months ago, and we were no longer living in our home state at that time. They developed a friendship and played tennis together regularly since he works in the fitness and sports medicine field, and there were tennis courts at his previous workplace. I knew about this friend from the start of our relationship, so I never suspected anything unusual, as at that time, I had no reason to doubt his friends. Eventually, he did mention that she had flirted with him, but he claimed that he primarily maintained the friendship because of their shared interest in tennis and did not socialize outside of that context. I also knew she was aware of my existence since he shared a conversation they had about me when we first started dating, which made me feel at ease. As long as he set boundaries, I didn't have any concerns. Fast forward to his first visit to see me in my current state, and I noticed him texting someone with an unusual nickname, Vanilla Bean. I didn't think much of it, as we have a mutual friend from back home whom we occasionally call Bean, so I assumed it was that individual. However, amid some tension we were experiencing, I felt compelled to check his phone, so I asked for his permission, and he handed it to me. I discovered that Vanilla Bean was the tennis girl, and I found numerous flirty and suggestive messages, primarily from her. To be fair, these texts dated back over a year before we started dating, and none of it coincided with our relationship. Their conversations had remained strictly about tennis, while he was in town and occasional life updates in the past year, indicating that the flirting had ceased well before our relationship began. Her nickname in his phone seemed to be an inside joke since she is considered Vanilla, a name he explained he assigned a long time ago and simply never changed. Additionally, I found more recent texts about me, and the timestamps indicated that during his visit, she was inquiring about me and how our first visit was going, to which he responded that he was enjoying his time. Nonetheless, I felt betrayed because he certainly did participate in flirty and charged conversations, even if it was some time ago. I had thought he was not engaging in such interactions, although, from what I gathered, she was the one who initiated these flirty conversations. At the same time, I found messages between him and another former coworker from his current job. These appeared to be strictly about fitness, as she had returned to his studio for training, and they practiced together before going out as a group for drinks. However, I noted that they had flirted, again, about a year ago, when he first relocated, and she had texted him occasionally to check in as a friend, including during our relationship. Similar to the tennis girl, the flirting seemed to be environmentally initiated by her, and there were several instances where he did not respond or kept it friendly. This all left me feeling uneasy about the women he associates with and the boundaries he establishes with them, particularly since he had not informed me he was spending time with her. He mentioned they had lunch together, but it happened to be at the same restaurant next to the studio, and he felt she was trying to flirt with him again. He told her he had a girlfriend, but I felt uncomfortable discovering this from the messages rather than him telling me directly. When I confronted him about not mentioning that he had flirted back with the tennis girl, he claimed he never regarded it seriously. He stated it was all in good fun because he was single and enjoyed the attention, without giving it much thought. He apologized, acknowledging he should have been more upfront, but added that it was not important to him since it occurred before we were together, and he had no intentions of pursuing anything with her at the time. I asked if they had ever spent time together outside of tennis, and he responded that they had not. After another conversation, he revealed that he had made plans to play tennis with her during a return visit to our home state. When I expressed my discomfort, he then disclosed that he had actually gone to her house a couple of times to watch television, but insisted that nothing occurred between them. This revelation upset me because I had believed they only interacted at the tennis court. He explained that the times he went to her house were after they played tennis, and he had forgotten to mention it as it slipped his mind since he does not think much of her now that we are together, and it had been some time ago. He reiterated that their relationship was now strictly friendly and centered around tennis. Although they had flirted early on, they had an earlier conversation about setting boundaries and decided to stop flirting while maintaining their friendship, which was the only reason he continued to keep in touch with her. He apologized again and respected my discomfort by stating he would no longer hang out with or communicate with her. Now, I feel like something may have actually happened, and he is not being truthful, as he concealed the information about visiting her house a couple of times and omitted that he had engaged with her when she was flirtatious. The situation with the former coworker adds to my concerns. I'm also aware that this could be a matter of retroactive jealousy or insecurity on my part, since he has agreed not to interact with her anymore. Nonetheless, the fact that he was not completely transparent from the beginning, and it took months for him to reveal that there was more to their relationship than just tennis, indicates he might have had ulterior motives for maintaining contact, which he may have continued if I hadn't investigated further. I'm open to hearing different perspectives on this, yet I still feel deeply betrayed and deceived in some way. I'm uncertain if this constitutes cheating in any form. All I know is that I am unhappy with the situation, but willing to address my feelings if that is necessary. I'm not sure how to approach discussing my lack of trust with him now. How should we begin to rebuild trust after this? Or is it possible that my trust issues or retroactive jealousy are at play, indicating that I have work to do on my own?